You will recall that the renegotiation of the 2009 agreements between the federal government and university-based unions, which are four: ASUU, SANU, NAT, and NASU, commenced on Monday, February 13, 2017. However, due to a number of unforeseen circumstances, especially the COVID-19 pandemic, the exercise has had to stop and it has dragged on till now. The committee, which is expected to review the draft proposed federal government ASUU agreement, has the following terms of reference, four of them. Number one, it is to liaise and consult with all relevant stakeholders in order to finalize the position of the federal government on the issues in the draft proposed negotiated agreement. Number two, to renegotiate realistic and workable terms the 2009 agreement with other university-based unions. Number three, to negotiate and recommend any other issue the committee deems relevant to the position of the university system to achieve global competitiveness. And four, to submit proposed draft agreement within 3 months from the date of inauguration, that is from today. Today is the 7th. Therefore, April, May, 7th June, I hope, or before, we'll be able to get the result from you.
Dr. Emmanuel Iruayenama, an industrial relations consultant, joins us in this conversation virtually to give us some perspective of what's happening on both sides of the divide. Thanks for joining us this morning, Doc. Of course, you know what the issues are. It's the federal government versus ASUU, and it would seem like both bodies are versus education. What's your reading of this, and what kind of intervention should we be looking at for a quick resolution of the issues?
Good morning. Good morning. There can't be any better intervention than the parties coming to terms with reality. Over the years, we've said it, and we've said it severally, that there have been several errors of negotiation. The quickest way out of it is very simple, that both parties come to terms with reality. First is the fact that in industrial relations generally, no agreement reached under duress survives. The parties have not been real to themselves for a very long time. There have been issues of mandate and no guarantee of mandates gotten. They talked through and then signed off something. Of course, I'm aware that at the time some of the agreements they have flagged in happened, there are some legal implications for those agreements. Issues of justiciability of collective agreement was still very, very a top issue in Nigeria. And perhaps that was why the then Minister of Education, I think Mabueze, did say clearly that it was more like a gentleman agreement. Yes, as of today, the National Industrial Court, which has the powers of adopting international best practice, seems to have changed that concept to making it seem as though all agreements, as it were, should be respected and obeyed, which is fine by me. But as we should remember, understand the double situation, and then come to terms. How did they reach even those agreements they reached? Is it feasible? I hear currently the government is opening a cabinet for all. So come, let's renegotiate this thing. The agreements are overdue. For me, both parties should face reality. Come to the table, back, and see what is feasible and pursue it therefrom. You have been reaching agreements all these years, but with different governments, and none is being implementable. Get to the table and ask yourself, why is it not implementable? We must be sincere to ourselves. I have argued At one end, you are asking for autonomy. At another end, you are asking for funding. That's a contradiction, if you ask me. A clear contradiction.
So, what would be, pardon me, Doctor, so what would be facing reality for federal government? I mean, you said for ASUU, they need to ask themselves, is this feasible? I mean, feasibility for ASUU. But for federal government, what would facing reality mean for them? Or for it, in this case?
The first question, the first problem I have is, what kind of federal government are we really having? How long will this feeding continue? We are talking about tertiary education. You want to swallow everything. Can you handle it in the first instance? Who are ASUU members? Where do they belong? We have about two kinds of tertiary institutions in Nigeria. Two structures. You have state government owned and federal government owned. What are you negotiating for? Are you negotiating for the ones you own, or you're negotiating for the ones the states have? Let's get down.
So for you, if you're going to be, what is being real now? The issues you are raising will seem like, maybe they haven't even existed or they haven't even been looked at from that perspective before. Help us understand the exact issues we are dealing with here, one after the other. You've talked about the fact that, okay, on the one hand, ASUU is asking for autonomy and then asking for funding. But as currently structured, the NUC is the supervisory organization, so to speak, for ASUU, for all universities where ASUU members work and all of that. So where does that position of yours, where does it stand?
Limited to regulation. Of course, that's what it's supposed to be after all. It's regulation. Set the standards for independent entities to operate.
Okay. So, but
NUC in such a way to fund themselves.
Are you saying the university should be able to fund themselves?
Fund themselves. Why is ASUU not aspiring to that? We should be aspiring to funding ourselves as it's done in any other clime. So we should be thinking.
How, in your opinion, would that happen? Given that the purchasing power of many people may not be able to accommodate the kind of funding that universities will be asking for.
The truth be told, your research ventures, we should. As of today, how many of our tertiary institutions are actually pursuing income-generatable research ventures? Push them. Push them. They should aspire to something that will generate something that they want. If you earn it, you'll get it. Go ahead. Our academics should be thinking seriously of how to use their knowledge to create wealth. We should be thinking in that direction. Now, somebody will ask me why you think that's possible in the immediate. Oh no, it may not be possible in the immediate. And that's why I said we should come to the table and discuss reality. We can face it. Look, we aspire that in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, government should be able to get out of this and then allow us complete autonomy. And in the meantime, this should be the level of support we can get. And this is what is possible.
Okay. Doctor, let's expand this conversation. We're now being joined by Mr. Femi Aborishade, who is a legal practitioner. He joins us via Zoom from Ibadan in Oyo State. Well, thank you for joining us on the program. So there's been a lot of talk about the justiciability of the agreements that were reached in previous terms. And it is said that, once you put pen to paper, it is legally binding. Now, the federal government wants to renegotiate the agreement that was renegotiated based on an agreement that was agreed upon earlier on. So, there's a lot of twists and turns here. What's the position of the law when agreements are reached? As we're saying, well, you agreed to this. Government is a continuum, so there's no point trying to, shift the goalpost, as it were. But what's your reading of all of this?
Thanks very much. I think we have to understand that it is no longer the law that agreement agreements are binding in honor only. By the amendment of the Constitution in 2010, by virtue of Section 254C sub 1, agreements are enforceable. Collective agreements are enforceable. The National Industrial Court of Nigeria has been empowered to enforce collective agreements. Therefore, the 2009 agreement reached between the federal government and ASUU, that agreement is enforceable. And we must understand one thing. ASUU is carrying a burden on behalf of the entire society for the actualization of Section 18, sub 3A to E. Section 18, sub 3A to E provides for free education from cradle to grave. In other words, from primary school to adult literacy education. That is the burden ASUU has carried on behalf of the society. The rest of the society, the students, workers, labor unions, professionals, the poor, should rise up and support ASUU actively by demonstrating peacefully in the street for the actualization of Section 18, sub 3A to E. That is the essence of the ASUU right.
So staying on that provision of the law, it's quite interesting you bring that up, because that has been brought up time and again. And it says, I mean, from cradle to grave, as you said, but we're seeing a case where those students are sadly getting nearer, I mean, moving far away from the cradle, inching towards the grave, and it's not being achieved. If anything, there's a strike ongoing right now. So in terms of the enforceability, there's a reality on ground. And I think that's what the doctor that spoke earlier, Dr. Iruayenama, spoke about, that, you know what, we need to face reality here. Is government able to afford that? I mean, I wish we could look into the purse of government and just be able to see that. But the president has said it, that ASUU needs to show some understanding, as it were. He said it when he met with, NIREC. So in terms of the law, yes, but then the reality on ground, how do we balance that? Because these students are growing older by the day, and it might get to a point that that is never achieved.
Yes, it is very simple and very clear. We need to understand that politics is about who gets what, where, and when. Those who are controlling the reins of power today, they want to shortcut ordinary people by denying them the resources to provide free education. I argue, I stand on the position that given the degree of corruption in this country, nobody can tell us that Nigeria does not have enough resources to provide for basic needs, including education. What Nigeria does not have is the resource to take care of the greed of those who are ruling us. Those who are ruling us have taken a position consciously to destroy public education for the benefit of the growth of privately owned institutions. That is why they are not funding education appropriately. Nigeria has the resources. The economy of Nigeria has grown by about 4 times since 2015. In 2015, the budget, the expenditure was about 4 trillion naira. This year is about 16 trillion naira. That is about 4 times. In the 2022 budget, the benchmark for the price of oil in the international market was fixed at $57 per barrel. That amount is over 2 times that benchmark. The exchange rate, the naira has collapsed. Oil is sold in the international market in dollars. With the exchange rate that has collapsed with the destruction of the naira, the government has a lot of resources. What they are not prepared to do is to devote the resources to basic needs of ordinary people.
So let me take this to
we
Ms.
need to take a position that we identify with ASUU.
Okay.
As against
Mr.
government
Aborishade, let me take this to Dr. Iruayenama, because you seem to think that the government is well and able to do these things. And you talked about the economy. I know that there's a whole lot of debate around what government has and what it can spend on. But Doctor, on the back of Mr. Aborishade's understanding and submissions regarding this, do you still think that, there's no justiciability, or what's the word you use, the enforceability of the agreement that was reached? Iruayenama, can you hear me? If you can, please unmute your microphone. Yes, please go ahead. Oh, yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I said I think I need to make some clarification. I said in time past, like he did also agree, political agreements in Nigeria was unjusticiable. As of today, by the empowerment of the National Industrial Court and indeed her pronouncement, it has become justiciable, following international best practice. Even though the laws as made by ILO are not yet as of today domesticated in our country. But by the powers of NIC, it is now seemingly justiciable. Now, that's on one part. Now, looking at whether or not we have the resources, let's be real. The thing is there before us. We are merely living in the past. We are merely living on figures. If you think Nigeria is rich, we are deceiving ourselves. Nigeria is bleeding. Nigeria has a almost complete decayed system. As much as education is valuable and is needed, so are other sectors of the economy. So if you think that one naira has come in extra, the question we're asking ourselves is how many other sectors require this 1 naira at the same time?
But Doctor,
yes.
My apologies. What's a little troubling for me here is, at the end of the day, it's the destiny of the students that is at stake here. And it would seem like no one is paying attention to that. FG is looking ASUU in the eye, ASUU is looking FG in the eye, and it would seem everyone is completely ignoring the students. And these sets of students, we expect them to take over the reins of government at various levels of government in Nigeria.
That is my word, and that's why I'm advocating that both parties must come to terms with reality. What is feasible? What is feasible? At every point in time, and say, okay, what's the situation on ground? Government be honest to us. We are also honest. We have an intention. We're actually honest with our drive to ensuring that we have a functional education. Let's come back to the table and ask ourselves, what in truth is feasible? How do we share it? How do we work towards getting the total thing? How long can it do? This is our own contribution internally. We intend to.
Dr. Iruayenama, if you would prioritize, my apologies again, if you would prioritize what government should give attention to, what for you would be a priority? Part of what they're asking for is the EAA for the lecturers, revitalization for the universities, and all of that. What should, in your opinion, be government's priority in dealing with this issue? Previous negotiations notwithstanding.
Pay is the pay for the workers very, very important. the pay for the workers very, very important. We should look at a systematic infrastructure development in our schools. How do we ensure that we have proper infrastructure in these schools? The issues of the mode of payment and the rest of them, for me, doesn't really matter as long as they are being paid. It's not a priority. Government at one end is claiming that there is so much corruption in the payment cycle and that they want to clean it. ASUU is fighting that and is opting for what she thinks best. And for government, perhaps she's also asking herself, if ASUU succeeds in this, maybe other sectors of the economy too will also come up with similar things, demand to distort what it intends to do universally in the country. That's one argument on this one. For me, that's not a priority. If most schools, most schools are actually glorified university, ask me. So first and foremost, let's get to and ask ourselves, what is feasible? What are the total demand? What's the demand before us? What is feasible? What can we do now? What can we do later? And this idea of negotiating always with the gun by the neck should cease. It won't work. It should be a going business. Every other time we should be talking. Government must open a way. Both parties must open a way for continuous talk. And
all right, Doctor.
This is what we gave out. This is what we've done so far. We need to see. There have been many interventions of government after all, even in the education sector. So what do you call it? ETI. The impacts are nothing.
Okay.
So government must come to time.
All right, Mr. Aborishade, let me ask Mr. Aborishade the same question I asked concerning students. I mean, you have been a student in this country, and a number of people would also, reference that with you as well. The position of the students right now, it will be like they're at the mercy of whatever it is that will happen. What are the implications that we may be ignoring right now with FG and ASUU looking each other in the eye and the students seem to be completely at a loss?
Well, before I answer that question, let me correct one misconception which my colleague has put across. I want to correct the misconception that ILO standards are not part of our laws. In actual fact, by virtue of Section 254C, subparagraph 1, subparagraph H, subparagraph F, and subparagraph 2 of the Constitution, ILO standards, and in particular, conventions that have been ratified by Nigeria have become constitutional provisions because they have been incorporated by those sections I cited into the Constitution. So I want to correct that impression. As far as the students are concerned, what they need to realize is that there is no room for indifference. We should all in this country, and particularly the labor movement, we should all in this country take a position that the federal government has no discretion not to implement the provisions of the Constitution. If the Constitution in Section 18 of 3A to E provides for free education, so be it. That provision must be implemented. All of those ruling us today, they swore to an oath to implement the provisions of Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which includes provision of free education from cradle to grave.
Mr. Aborishade, just a second. Just a second. On that one, that provision of the Constitution also put a kind of caveat that says, as soon as it's practicable. So what if
Yes,
government says in
I
their
agree
own eye
with
it's
you
not
as
practicable?
soon as it is practicable. My
Yes.
own argument, my own position is that given the degree of corruption in this country that we hear about, that we read on a daily basis, nobody can say Nigeria does not have the resources to provide free education.
Okay. All right. We
That
have
is
to
my
thank you.
position.
Yeah, we have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation. Who is